Hey, why are you here? Clearly, if you clicked on this video, you're curious about Zero Parades for Dead Spies, but the question is why? Are you curious about a game you know nothing about? Have you played another story-rich RPG and wonder if this could be your next big obsession? Or are you a Disco Elysium fan, looking to see if zaum actually did it? To see if they managed to capture the lightning in a bottle that was Disco Elysium without the very people that painstakingly crafted the world and style of a game that has already inspired an entire subgenre of gaming and RPGs. I ask these questions because this video is for all of you in different capacities. I believe it's entirely possible to review Zero Parades for Dead Spies without even once comparing it to Disco, but doing so is a double-edged sword. On one hand, the people who made Zero Parades at zaum are passionate and talented people, many of whom uprooted their lives for the chance to work on Disco Elysium 2, only to have that dream pulled out from under them and forced to fill the shoes of their monolithic predecessor. On the other, none of the original writers or designers of Disco are at zaum anymore. So while the very core of this game is conducive of the disco energy to disco veterans, it may feel at times like a futile imitation, a reanimated corpse. But coming into this experience with the weight of these realities in mind, I've come to the conclusion that this is a special game. Having played Zero Parades for myself, I can tell you all about my stern reservations, my pointed critiques, my skeptical approach to the first few hours. But I can also tell you about the moment it all changed. The moment I felt the ground sink beneath me, let myself be wrapped up in the warm embrace of something I once thought lost and irreplaceable. This is a review of Zero Parades for Dead Spies. Before playing this game, I obsessed over the making of Disco Elysium, the fallout of zaum, and the many resulting successors of Disco Elysium. I did so because I wanted to understand who was making this game, the first of what may very well be 5 games to carry the legacy and burden of Disco Elysium. It's a melancholic story about struggle turned triumph, friends and idols turned enemies, and businessmen operating in the gray area of legality and having a single piece of art impact millions and then hundreds with a few dozen at the epicenter of a disaster. Ultimately, I came to the conclusion that while the people at zaum may not be Robert Kurvitz or Alexander Rostov, they are artists in their own right. People who share a love of disco with those who played it and put in the blood, sweat, and tears to work in the haunted office where all of this turmoil spawned. Haunted by the specters of disco and the absence of those who made it. It's with all this in mind that I booted up Zero Parades and opened up all of my senses to feel my way through these complex emotions. Immediately, my conscious and subconscious brain started drawing comparisons. The art style of the menu screen, the hum of the intro theme, and the familiar UI of a dialogue menu sliding into place, and an unknown voice in a familiar tone manifesting in my ear.
This is a dangerous place, Cascade. I should never have come.
It was in some ways an overwhelming of the senses and an underwhelming of the expectations. And how couldn't it be? I was experiencing something that I never thought I could again, as well as hoping for something that may never even be achievable. I couldn't help but lean in and pull on the threads of the scene in front of me, calling out every minor difference. We swapped the detective for a spy. We made the protagonist a woman with dissociative issues instead of a man with amnesia. We gave you a nerdy partner with glasses, but he's incapacitated. The roles are swapped. You are Kim. This is your Harry. I heard it saying, we wanted to make Disco Elysium 2, and we wanted to make something completely brand new. And I thought that it was blissfully unaware that it was contradicting itself. I was searching for traces of Disco Elysium, seeking comfort in the confusion, but I was blinding myself to what Zero Parades actually was.
Whatever happens has already happened.
Zero Parades is an isometric RPG set in Portofino, a strange and quiet town in a weirdly sci-fi setting with a complicated history and a three-way struggle for cultural and ideological power. It is a deeply political game, much like Disco before it, and yet, that's what we're all here for, isn't it? You play as Herschel Wilk, codename Cascade, a disgraced opera agent on a mission to redeem yourself 5 years after a catastrophic mission failure led to your team being disbanded and you put on ice. Throughout the game, you'll get to know the world of Portofino and its wide cast of colorful characters, from the man with his heart in a box to the sinful businessman running the world behind closed doors. If you've never played a game like this before, you should know that it's an RPG that borrows more from traditional tabletop RPGs rather than something like Skyrim. You spec out your character, deciding which skills to specialize in, and after that, nearly every action in this game is decided by a roll of the dice. This means every part of being a spy, from disappearing in a crowd or dodging a bullet to simple checks like detecting hints of truths in someone's lie, will all revolve around the luck of your dice, and you will fail a lot. But that's part of the game. When you do so, you'll take damage in one of these three forms: fatigue, anxiety, or delirium. Hit 15 points in any of them and you start taking debuffs. Hit 20 and the game forces you to lose a skill point from a random skill of your choice, permanently. This might sound complicated, but it really boils down to know when to walk away, know when to fight, and know when to lock in. If you're not careful, you can lose some skill points before you even leave the first room, starting you off on completely the wrong foot. I could sit here and describe every system in this game, from exploring the world to consumables to clothing items with stat boosts, and the incredible system of internalized thoughts ripped straight from Disco Elysium, but would simply be here all day. Because as we established, everything in this game takes place in conversation. And believe me, there are a lot of conversations. Across its 40-hour runtime, you'll be talking to locals, allies, enemies, and even your own subconscious to find clues, items, and put together key pieces of intel to accomplish your mission. I'm gonna be honest, this game will test you for brain rot. At times, the game will feel like you're playing a scaled-down version of Baldur's Gate, and the rest of the time, it'll feel like you're reading the 1,000 pages of War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. A simple conversation with one character lasted 10 minutes. 10 minutes reading dialogue, listening to verbal cues, and never so much as moving an inch. It's the biggest reason that some people might immediately bounce off this game, and the reason that I would say a game like this is best enjoyed slowly, over a cup of coffee on a nice rainy day. You shouldn't rush through it, or even try to skim it. Names of fictional people, places, groups, concepts, events, they'll keep coming up and connecting to one another in surprising ways. I wouldn't blame you for taking notes, but you don't really have to. You'll want to live in this world, not just merely pass it by. But be warned, the game would be more than happy to tell you about every single part of the world you inhabit. This includes the half-eaten sandwich that someone left in the dashboard of their car, and whatever you ask the 80-year-old lady with enough lead paint in her brain to cover a billboard is on you. To put it simply, if you're reading too much, you're probably asking too much. Put it simpler even, my brother in Christ, you made the sandwich. But there's some beauty to this. As a spy, you keep track of multiple loose ends in a small town where everyone seems to know each other. where the past has shaped the present and everything somehow connects. And therein lies the magic. Asking questions, educating yourself, closing up loose ends. They can grant you XP, money, more missions, and even help you complete other quests in ways that you might not have thought of. Now, a warning, there is some really arbitrary stuff here. Kicking a locked door open to progress a main quest later gave me a debuff for an optional skill check and read, -1, kicked an innocent door. You might find this frustrating, pointless, darn right stupid. I find this riveting. For some reason, I like being held accountable. I like it when the game remembers the mundane things I did, the words I spoke, and somehow makes that genuinely matter. Kicking the door doesn't pop up a message saying, "Everyone saw that," or "The door will remember that." It summons a strange version of quantum entanglement, and I'm willing to take the good with the bad to help my run feel that much more unique. Now, despite this high praise, I need to call out a problem that I've been noticing in many RPGs lately. That is, the illusion of choice. In games that offer you multiple options, approaches, dialogue choices, and outcomes, the end result of everything is usually the same. Case in point, I needed to find a hidden room. It turned out there were 3 completely different ways to get there. One involving my technical skills, one involving more detective work, and one including going undercover. On my first playthrough, I stumbled into one path naturally, but when I reloaded to test the others, I realized I had already qualified for the second path hours earlier without even knowing it. I just needed to trigger it, which I was holding out on. And the third path took me another 2 hours of grinding and exploration to get the right information and pass all the necessary skill checks. And then I was not ready for what followed. Sure, all 3 routes led to the same room and the same scene. It may feel like a classic illusion of choice. But had I not been trying to poke these holes in the game myself, this is probably just solid quest design. Depending on your build and how you've been playing, some paths are more natural than others. It's not about branching outcomes, it's about the game remembering who you are and helping you get there. This is yet another part of these games that, if you want to see everything, exhaust all the pieces of dialogue, go through the game with a fine-tooth comb, you're going to be here a while. But at the same time, you could just say fuck it. Throw caution to the wind, fail a skill check, sleep it off, try again the next day. This is one of my favorite things about Zero Parades, and one of the improvements upon Disco Elysium. Where other games would be quick to mark your failures as a game over, try again. Zero Parades gives you a slap on the wrist and says, now do it again. Try it again. Do better. It's got a more open sense of progression than Disco Elysium, for as well as that original game is designed, it isn't foolproof. Some players in Disco had runs go so good or so poorly that they didn't have anything to progress on day 2, and others were completely locked out of the ending from failing a difficult skill check with no way to unlock it again. It seems that zaum has learned from the missteps of Disco and the grievances of its players, allowing for more options to approach a problem and getting unstuck simply by waiting out the day and sleeping to unlock the locked skill checks. And for that, I commend it. Now, towards the beginning of this video, I painted a picture for you of how blind I felt coming back into this game. Despite having played a game much like it, I was struggling to let myself fall back into place with it. I bumbled my way through conversations, I failed multiple skill checks, I explored aimlessly, like a chicken with my head cut off. But after a while, I collected myself, and while normally I wouldn't save scum and continue through my run, I remembered that I was reviewing this game on my own. There was no one else to compare runs with. If I wanted to know how good or bad outcomes varied from one another, I had to do that digging myself, so after 2 hours of my first run, I started over. And this was actually the best thing I could have ever done. It was no longer lost. I knew what I was stepping into. I didn't come into my second run like my first, expecting to hear a dark, sulking voice in the back of my head. I didn't compare my partner in the chair to my former detective and best boy, Kim Kitsuragi, and I stopped trying to fill the shoes of Harry Dubois. Before I knew it, an hour had passed and a sensation had snuck up on me. The part of my brain where I can sense if a game is falling short was eerily quiet. The lack of criticism was made louder by an absence of skepticism. Wait a minute, I want to keep playing this. The slow realization enveloped me, and then all at once it hit me. I'm having fun. In the second hour, I ebbed and flowed, connecting with Zero Parades slowly. I was questioning a music vendor about a record that my partner was listening to when I had found him. The man started off berating me over my lack of music knowledge, my approach to consuming media, and I felt the language of navigating conversations and extracting information from difficult characters come back to me. You can easily brush off the man's rude comments or even be confrontational, only asking what you want to know, but the game presents you with plenty of follow-up questions. Why does he care so much about the format of the music? What exactly is it that he sees wrong with the people that visit his shop and the way they consume music? Those things might seem like useless information, but if you're curious, they're there. And these are things that can genuinely help you pass certain skill checks in the conversation, but this also does two things. Firstly, it creates a relationship with the character, an understanding of their less favorable sides and their more redeeming qualities. It makes them more human. The second thing is that it gives you the feeling that you're gonna be here a while. This is a conversation that I mentioned took 10 minutes. And in the middle of this conversation, I started craving a cup of coffee. Now listen, this sounds stupid to bring up in a game review, but the reason I bring it up is because it wasn't some random craving. It was a familiar feeling sneaking in from the back of my brain. Because what this game does, talking to people, exploring the world, discovering new paths, failing forwards and upwards, it makes all of it shockingly rewarding. I was in my jam rock shuffle all over again, but my steps felt lighter. I felt like Zaum's game designers really dialed in the feeling of progression that should come with a game about being a spy. When I sank into this feeling, I welcomed the rest of this game to continue to happen to me. The tense moments where I felt cornered enthralled me. A skill check with a steady 90% chance of passing had me holding my head in disbelief when it failed, and passing a skill check with a 12% Hail Mary roll lit my brain up like the dashboard of a European sports car. This warmth of familiarity melted away any skepticism I had with Zero Parades. After the first 8 hours and a few tense moments, the game reached a climax, a scene that felt like somehow my journey could end there, but it didn't. And then, the rest of the game opened up. The entirety of my playtime up until that moment was a tutorial, a showcase of world building, learning gameplay systems, and building up the skills and network to fully be able to take on the task that everything was pointing towards. The mission. This was a moment that sealed the deal for me. The moment that I knew I was in good hands. The moment in Disco where getting the hanged man's body off the tree and performing an autopsy, that you realize that this game goes deeper than you likely would have ever anticipated, where your scope widens and your real journey begins. I feel the need to stop covering the story and the mechanics there. After that point, the game had hooked me, and everything I did after that was only more rewarding and helped me sink into a position where I can truly recommend Zero Parades. It is a deep and rewarding espionage RPG, a game that takes the best of its predecessor and runs confidently in its own directions, maybe stumbling a few times. But it's a story worth telling and a game worth playing, and that is, if you don't mind reading a book for about 40 hours. And yet, even as I stopped making comparisons during gameplay after each session, the feeling nagged at the back of my head. There was an inescapable feeling that while Zero Parades was made well, it was missing a certain quality that I couldn't pin down, but was present through all of Disco Elysium. After a lot of thought, I decided to pin it to my connection to the world of Revachol, to the cast of Martinez, and the world of Sacred and Terrible Air. There's just something about the style of Robert Kurvitz and Alexander Rostov's world building that Zero Parades didn't quite reach for me. At its best, Zero Parades feels like it earns a top spot in the RPG genre, and is a prime showing for whatever genre of disco likes have followed and will come after. And at its worst, Zero Parades feels like Zaum said, let's make a game just as good as Disco Elysium, and a passionate group of people took that and ran with it. It may not fully satiate the hunger for a Disco Elysium 2 or feel completely unique in its own right, but when you have such massive shoes to fill, such massive pressure on your shoulders, and the people who you would once hope to make proud actively root for your demise, it's impossible to not fall just a bit short. In Shooting for the Moon, Zero Parades has landed among the stars, a beautiful speck in the sky, a sun in its own right. For some, I suspect that star will be a distant and unremarkable dot among the other stars that will fill the sky, incomparable to the star they call the sun. For others, I suspect that Zero Parades will be the sun and Disco Elysium will be a star, but to me, Disco Elysium will always be the brightest star, the North Star that guided me here. Thank you for listening to that review of Zero Parades. Whether you're a disco fan or someone completely new to the genre, I hope you enjoyed it and that it helped you make a decision to play this game or not. However, if you can separate art from the business that owns it, play this. And if you can't, I understand, but you're missing something just a bit special. It's not lost on me that Zaum was able to make a game like Zero Parades as well because of the likely immense resources that it gained from complete ownership of the Disco property. In a business sense, I can't say that it feels good to put $1 in the pockets of businessmen that operate in the gray area of undocumented transactions and verbal agreements that won't hold up in court. Especially not when it displaces creatives and fights tooth and nail to keep the rights to an artist's life's work for the sake of profit above all else. If you choose not to play Zero Parades and you stand firmly behind Robert Kurvitz and those affected, I respect that. If you choose to acquire a copy through indirect means and still play it, I respect that just as much. The irony of these games with firm beliefs of communism, capital, and the production and consumption of art is not lost on me. While this is the first of many Disco successors to come, most notably with the anticipation of Kurvitz's studio Red Info and the attempts by Argo Tulik to seize back the Disco IP, I hope that the future of these games is bright, and that we can appreciate them as art removed from capital, and the means of which it is produced. This isn't a perfect video, this isn't a perfect review, and I'm not claiming that I'm right, but I hope that this video makes sense to the people that agree with it. And if you disagree with it, and you hate me, and you think that I'm a scab or a sellout, that's fine. I hope that whatever comes next, we can all enjoy it. I can only speak for myself and say that I loved this game, made by people in a haunted office, sadly, despite its funding. That's a contradictory reality, and you'll have to decide what that means for you. But thank you again for watching. If you've made it this far, I'm gonna assume you're either asleep or that you really like this video. Please tell me in the comments, does it shock you that maybe something this good could exist after Disco Elysium? And when you get to play the game later this week, please come back and leave a comment. Tell me what you thought. Be honest. This was a very interesting experience for me, and having no one to bounce off of and being alone with my thoughts on it, it's new, it's unfamiliar, and I'm gonna try to do better as well. I'm not objectively correct all the time, and I'm not an expert, but I hope I'm someone that you can trust. With that being said, hope to see you around. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.